You've written a book titled Enchanted Objects. Why did you choose the adjective enchanted?
Well, I think the industry is using lots and lots of different terms for what this connectivity in everything will mean. And I've been to ubiquitous computing conferences, pervasive computing conferences, Internet of Things, things that think is what we called it at the Media Lab for a while. And for me, I've been a fan of magic and of sort of studying the tropes that magicians have used to control like the emotional arc of a trick, for example. And I think enchantment for me sort of sets a high bar for designers to consider not just like the mechanism of what's happening, but to also consider how people engaged and how are people delighted and what's their emotional reaction to whatever the new connectivity or new sensor or new display is that is in one of these objects. So when I say enchanted objects, I really mean Internet of Things, where nearly everything is connected, but also things that you want, that you desire, and that delight you.
Right, and so what objects should we enchant? Just everything, or?
Yeah, well, it's really hard to think of something that you couldn't enchant. I mean, from a size perspective, like chips are getting smaller and smaller. From a cost perspective, you can put chipsets for less than a few dollars in almost everything. I invented some medication packaging that knows if you've taken your meds or not, and it will send a text message so you don't forget, or send a weekly email to a loved one that shows you, and that's like the most mundane thing. There are 3.5 billion amber vials that are distributed in the US every year. So boy, like if you can sort of embed it in medication packaging, like what could you not enchant?
Right.
So I think it has more to do, I mean, the limits of this I think are more around how are these things designed, and are they designed to be polite? Are they designed to respect your attention and not overwhelm you? Are they designed to play nice together? And those are much more about good design and less about either size constraints or cost constraints or battery constraints.
So things that are really solving a problem or addressing a user behavior kind of situation. Yeah,
I do think problem solving is a good place to start, although I think there are lots of new interactions that may delight people in ways that don't exactly solve problems. But when I encourage my students or I do workshops with companies around this, I usually get them to go for objects that are the most common, meaning the things you touch the most often or buy the most often. Like a connected refrigerator is the worst thing because how many times do you upgrade your fridge, right? But a connected trash can, like that measures some of the same information, like things go in and out of the fridge, but then they also go into the trash can. So if you want to do supply chain management for the house, it might be like a trash can that should be connected. But like I'm intrigued with silverware, with shoes, with jewelry, with clothing, with glass, things that people have, they already acknowledge that there's redundancy in their life around these things, and they're usually differentiated by fashion, not by function. I mean, those are sort of mature technologies that I think would be prone or susceptible to a little bit of differentiation with technology.
Right, and you mentioned earlier avoiding becoming overwhelmed. How do we do that?
Well, I started a company called Ambient Devices, and its sole mission was to try to figure out how do you put information in people's cognitive periphery, meaning how do you design things that use the pre-attentive part of your brain, the part of your brain that senses whether is there a window open over there, and is there wind that's blowing something up there that's moving a little bit, or is there a pattern on the wall or a color. All of those phenomena of using light and pattern and texture are all pre-attentive, meaning your brain processes them in parallel. It's non-distracting. It happens in less than 250 milliseconds. And that's the sort of design space, I think, for the best types of interactions with objects, because they don't tend to overwhelm you. And you don't perceive them as being a cognitive load, because they aren't a cognitive load. So no one complains like, I have too many windows in my house, and so I'm really distracted by my windows, or art on the wall or something. I mean, some of the best interfaces are the ones where you have a force feedback. You feel the doorknob is harder to open on the hospital door because someone's sleeping inside, or the door handle on your car is harder to open because a bike is passing, or your wallet is harder to open because you're blowing through your monthly budget, or I mean, all of these things can be. Those are not just those are not just places to paint displays or pixels, but it's also ways to affect or actuate the things that we touch, drawers and cabinetry and that sort of stuff.
Right, and there's some visual things too. I've seen the umbrella that will have the light at the very end that just blinks before you walk out the door to say, hey, it's going to rain.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that was inspired by a Frodo, and Frodo had a sword called Sting. Do you remember its function?
Yes.
Yeah, so it knew when orcs were nearby. So I thought, well, we should do umbrellas that know when rain is nearby, and just sort of glows blue in the same way. But for me, that sort of emblemizes this idea that these interfaces can be really simple if they're embedded in many, many more things. So once the apps that are in your phone can sort of leap out into the world onto nearly everything, then you don't need like a complicated operating system to swipe and double tap and all the things you do, because then the umbrella doesn't need to show anything else except for weather, and it never needs upgrades, it never makes you feel stupid, it can just do one thing.
Right. And kind of related to this, in a recent interview, you noted that there were really only 4 ways the Internet of Things would turn out. What were those 4 ways? Yeah,
so in the first part of the book, I talk about 4 futures for our relationship to technology. And the first one is black glass slabs. So it's sort of the world of apps and the world of painting pixels on more and more surfaces. I think that has a fatal flaw, which is it consumes too much of our attention. Another place we could locate technology in relationship to ourselves is by embedding it in and on ourselves. This is sort of the superpower fantasy, the Iron Man fantasy, which I think sort of we've gone down that path with Google Glass a little bit, and I think that's problematic to put technology in front of our face or on our face because it harms social interaction. But that's another very different future than phones. Another place is social robots, right? So rather than putting it on us, we could just put it on them. Right? We could just have other things that take care of us, sort of like the Downton Abbey fantasy, different people to drive you or to clothe you or to cook for you, and those people could, be personalitied, could be personalitied agents. And I think that future is flawed, even though there's a large robotics community that's pursuing it for what was described as the uncanny valley, which is the closer those things get to human likeness, the more our emotional response to them will fall off a cliff, and we will feel like they threaten our own humanity, sort of like Frankenstein or the Jewish folklore golem. They're sort of too close to ourselves, so they threaten us. So I think the fourth way for us to interact with tech is the most promising and most desirable, which is to put a little bit of AI in lots and lots of things. So that's what I call enchanted objects. Right.
And so where do you fall on that AI spectrum of the robots will save us all to the robots will kill us all?
Well, I think there's an important distinction to be made around the difference between big AI and incremental AI. So big AI is, Hal, who is supposed to be omniscient and all-knowing and really exert force in our life, sort of like Skynet. And I think the more desirable way forward is sort of like Enchanted Objects, is to atomize functionality and embed a little bit of smarts in lots of things. And I see that as just incremental tools that we want. And I don't think those incremental tools are going to take over. I think we all want better tools. We're all willing to try a new app or a new object. And those things won't threaten jobs. They will just allow us to be more effective and hopefully more efficient.
And so changing directions just a little bit, how do you define design? And are you finding that your definition is changing with this growth in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tim Brown from IDEO described this, T that we all have, where we're deep in some skill sets and shallow in others. And I think as sort of the world of hardware design combines with software, combines with experience design, combines with psychology more and more, we have to be liberal arts generalists and sort of Renaissance people, and in terms of considering all of the, psychological drives that are involved in why people adopt new things, or why we fall out of love with new things, or how certain technologies overpromise. I think one of the problems with Siri and Cortana is that the designers sort of had too much hubris. Like they said, you can ask Siri any question. Like it's incredibly hard to fulfill on the promise of ask any question.
Right.
And if we had more of a framing of, she's the perfect person to ask about searching for restaurants or searching for directions, then she would work, 95% of the time rather than failing you 40% of the time, which is my experience.
Right.
So I think, and that's, doing that well is certainly an understanding of expectation setting and of psychology. And, you could say a lot of that can be solved in terms of the design of these things with multifunctional teams. But I think it's more and more expected that people will be conversant in sort of all aspects of design, with aesthetics and ethics and expectation setting and psychology and experience design. And so I think it's a good place for O'Reilly to be right now because there's an expectation that you will have some dexterity in all aspects.
And kind of related to that, the term Internet of Things, what does that mean to you as a designer? And what aspects of these emerging technologies do you find most consequential?
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting about Internet of Things is its impact on business models. And so this is where design means a little bit of MBA as well, because I ran into a guy who founded an intelligent toothbrush, an internet-connected toothbrush company last week, and it's called the Beam Brush. So it's a $29, like brawn type, toothbrush. And it talks to your phone and measures whether you've brushed or not. And I have 2 little kids, and we totally need a gamified system to motivate them to brush for more than 10 seconds. But I said, what's your business model for this device? Like, how many brushes do you think you're going to sell? Or do you have a razors and blades model? You're going to sell a lot of bristles and give away the bottom part of the brush, And he said, actually, I'm going to start a dental insurance company. Because 120 million people in the US don't have dental insurance because it's expensive. It's like $30 a month for dental insurance. And we're all optimistic, like, we'll brush, it'll be fine. But he said, if people use the Beam Brush and we know that what their hygiene habits are, then we can offer a second tier, which is $10 dental insurance.
Oh, wow.
So isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So rather than like the first business model would have been sell widgets, the second business model would have been like sell the consumables that the widgets use, but then this is like a tertiary business model, which is to sell the behavioral change ramification in terms of financing their risk for dental interventions or whatever. So that's really interesting to me that these objects can spin up so many different business models.
And so for my last question, and kind of related to what you were just talking about, what people or projects are you following? What are you finding personally exciting these days?
Well, what I gave a talk about today, which is what I find most personally exciting, because I wrote the talk yesterday, is just sort of what the future of photography looks like. Okay. Because what I see when I look around at all of the connected things is people are using cameras because they're just dirt cheap, and they actually sense a lot of information. So people are putting cameras in the tip of a pen in order to understand what's being written, or in the tip of a paintbrush at the Media Lab called the I/O brush, so you can sample a color or a texture, a pattern, and then paint with that color. Or they're putting cameras like in trees for hunters, or they're putting them in bike helmets to look at optical flow to see how fast you're biking, or skiing helmets. And I've been wearing a camera that's sort of sewed into my clothing called the Narrative app, and that takes a photo automatically every 30 seconds. It's sort of like what cops are wearing as body cameras. But all these photos need image recognition. And so I've been working, to me, that's sort of where Internet of Things meets the cloud, meets the elastic compute capabilities that Amazon offers. So at this company that I'm running called Ditto, we have 300 to 400 big multi-headed servers in Amazon's cloud, like running continuously, looking at all of the photos that people are posting with their their narrative clips or with on Instagram or on Tumblr or on all the public sources of photos. So what's really exciting, I think, is where all of these sensors cast off data exhaust that requires machine learning up in the cloud that reveal patterns about who's into beach vacations. Like if I looked at your last 2 years of photos, I'd probably be able to see, like, are you a foodie? Are you into sports? Or what kind of vacations do you enjoy? What are your other affinities? Are you shopping for a car? Are you shopping for furniture? Like, you take the pictures of the things that you're interested in. And so by looking at these photos, we really are starting to see people's affinities for different products, like how people are using Frenchie's mustard or Chobani yogurt, or when are people eating their Ben and Jerry's. It's actually late shifted. After the beer is the Ben and Jerry's spike. So the brands are buying this data, but then also I feel like what I talked about this morning is those photos with a little bit of structure, with computer vision, become actionable. So the photos that you post that I find inspiring of your beach vacation or something will be able to be actionable. I'll be able to say, how much does it cost to go to that place? Or book a table on OpenTable at that restaurant because it looks like you're having a great time. Or I want a stand-up paddleboard. Like, find me a stand-up paddleboard on eBay right now because I see your photo of the same thing. Yeah. And so I think that has ramifications for advertising and commerce, right? Because that's where people's eyeballs are on their social streams looking at their friends' photos. Right. And if that's where the attention is, then that's where commerce wants to go. And so I think one of the most exciting things, and it's sort of a capitalist idea, but that's the future of commerce. Like, social commerce is the future of how all of these sensors will contribute to a lot of photos, will contribute to people acting through these photos.
Right. Interesting. Well, thank you very much for talking with me today.
You're welcome. It's been fun.